זה עבר, זה נגמר, קצה חלום ודי, כל הזמן שנשב בין אצבעותיו, זה עבר, זה נגמר, לתמיד אולי, מעגל שנסגר ונשארת חי, ניפגש נתראה.
My sister, Mrs. Lea Rabin, I had never thought that a moment would come when I would grieve the loss of a brother, a colleague and a friend, a man, a soldier who met us on the opposite side of a divide. You lived as a soldier, you died as a soldier for peace.
Yitzhak Rabin lived the history of Israel. Through every trial and triumph, the struggle for independence, the wars for survival, the pursuit of peace, and all he served on the front lines. This son of David and of Solomon took up arms to defend Israel's freedom and laid down his life to secure Israel's future.
סבא, אתה היית ואותך הגיבור שלנו. אני רציתי שתדע שכל מה שעשיתי תמיד, ראיתי אותך לפני עיניי. הערכתך ואהבתך ליוו אותנו בכל צעד ובכל דרך, וחיינו לאור ערכיך תמיד. מעולם לא הזנחת ועכשיו הזניחו אותך. משיירת מלאכי שמיים שמלווים אותך עכשיו, אני מבקשת שישמרו עליך ושישמרו עליך טוב, כי אתה ראוי למשמר שכזה. אנחנו אוהבים אותך סבא תמיד.
המשמר יעבור לדום, משמר דום. המשמר יעבור לנוח, עמוד נוח.
כמו אל ים נזרום, נזרום, נבקש עד שנגיע וניגע אל החלום.
The history of the Jewish people is filled and packed with tragedies. It's a long story of tragedies, one after another. The first temple being destroyed, the second temple being destroyed, Jewish people going in exile for 2,000 years. But we belong to the very fortunate generation that has seen the real rebuild of the Jewish state as a result of the Holocaust. And now, 50 years later, we can say that it is a reality, an accepted reality in the Middle East. And since the peace process that started again in 1993, again I'm saying because it had started before with Egypt, and started all over again in 1993, my husband Yitzhak leading it. Ever since then, with all the ups and downs and difficulties, and right now when it seems that the process is kind of stuck, however, it is a reality. Peace in the Middle East has become already a reality. There are too many people who hope for it and wish for it and desire it and need it.
When I became Prime Minister, I decided to bring about a change.
Morning. Good morning. Good morning. I told you good morning. Thank you. Good morning. Hello. Hello, my friend. How are you?
How are you?
Good to see you.
I'm very happy to have this opportunity.
This is beautiful here.
I'm very cold.
How is Sua? How is she?
Well, thank you.
Is she here? No?
Yes,
Yeah?
yes.
You spent a lot of time meeting with Yitzhak Rabin. What kind of man was he?
He's a man of peace. He's a brave man. And he's the man who used to respect his parole d'honneur. Yes means yes. No means no. And not to forget that with His Excellency, we had signed the Peace of the Brave in the White House to build a new era in the Middle East. I can't forget it. And for me, it was a shock, a big shock. Believe me, I didn't have the ability to sleep this night. I lost him as a partner. I lost him as a leader. I lost him as an honest man. And I lost him, not me only personally, all of us had lost him in the Middle East. In the Middle East. Not only Israelis and Palestinians.
When the Rabin family was in mourning, you made a secret condolence call to Tel Aviv. Can you tell me about the visit?
It wasn't easy for me to go to Tel Aviv for security business. But it was my duty. And I insist to do it with the help of some Israelis. And we have done it. And for the first time, I say Her Excellency in her home with the family. And believe me, I felt, I'm still feeling as if we are one family.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו להדליק נר של חנוכה. אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שעשה ניסים לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה.
Regardless of how busy he was and how preoccupied with so many other things, we knew that he was always there for us.
We were all kind of mobilized to be around him, to support him. It went without saying. There was not a family decision that we are supporting him. Everything was very instinctively, very spontaneously. We were there behind him, believing in him, believing that he is the one and the best.
Hanukkah,
was always someone special, not the usual grandfather, but he still knew how to manage to do all the grand stuff, on the grandfather stuff.
I think as we agree upon, he was a very busy person. So he was not the kind of grandfather who will take you to ride horses and do this kind of activities. So it's mainly home activities, which is like watching TV and playing chess when we were younger. And we had this game with the hands, remember? The one that you are supposed to hit someone else's hands. So, and he used to cheat on us because he used to hold our hand with his finger that way, and you can't escape with your hand. So he used to win all the time, and it took us a few years to catch him doing that.
To understand that point in this game.
Yitzhak, during all his life, symbolized to many, many people the best that we have here in Israel, in the Jewish society, in the Zionist movement, in the rebuilding of the Jewish nation here in Israel. When I finished my high school, we went to the Upper Galilee to build a new kibbutz. We went up to Manara at January 1943. And when we came here, it was only hills, stones, winds, panorama, no water, no trees, no road, nothing. After Yitzhak went to United States, my father came to live with us here in Manara. And so even when Yitzhak was in United States, every time that he came to visit in Israel, he came to Manara to visit our father and me. And our father also buried here in Manara. My father have born in Ukraine, in a little village, Sidrovich, near Kiev. And in 1904, he decided to go to United States, to America. And when it was the First World War, people go to the Jewish Legion. They joined the British Army to conquer Palestine. My mother, Rosa Cohen, went to Odessa, and in the first ship that went after the First World War and after the revolution, she went to Palestine. It was in Passover 1920, and my father was in Jerusalem. He was already active in the Haganah, in the underground organization of the defense of the Jewish in Israel. And they heard that in the old city, some problems with the Arabs against the Jews. And this was the place that my father met my mother. In 1922, Yitzhak was born. In 1924, they came to Tel Aviv. So all my and Yitzhak's childhood was in Tel Aviv. And this was the house, the home of our parents and Yitzhak and me. We lived together with another family. That never will happen that Yitzhak or me or both of us will come to an empty home.
In 1927, I started my school here in this place together with Yitzhak Rabin. The school was special because our parents and the teachers They believed in new system of education. It means to educate the children to work the land, to prepare ourselves to be pioneers everywhere in the country according to the needs. Yitzhak Rabin was very shy, and we, the girls, we had many troubles to find the connection with him because of his shyness. And I remember we used to dance around dancing. Boy takes a girl and a girl takes a boy, but I can tell you with deep sorrow that no girl succeeds to take Yitzhak to dance.
I was born in Königsberg. At that time it was Germany, Ostpreußen. I was born into the hands of nannies. And this is how I grew up for 5 years in the safe hands, for better or for worse, of those German Fräulein. My parents were rebels that rebelled against Jewish tradition because Zionism was their religion. My father joined the Herzl Club when he was 15. As my father had always said, that with this lunatic, Adolf Hitler, I am not going to stay one single day. The morning after Hitler was elected, and the panic was really building up. It was already in the air. And as my father said, he's going to kill us all. I'm not staying here. I am rescuing myself and my family, and we are not staying here. So the morning after, I remember him running up and down the apartment, throwing things into a suitcase, and towards noontime he was out to the first train going to Trieste. From Trieste, the boat left for Palestine.
In 1937, I came here to Kaduri, to the agricultural school in the Galil, with Rabin and other boys with the same age. I was 15, like Rabin in those years. We want to be pioneers to establish the new Israel. And in those times, we were very friendly with the Arabs close with us, but a group of Arabs came from Transjordan and from Syria to attack the Jews in Israel, and of course Kaduri, because it was far from other settlements, Kaduri, and we were young and nobody helped us. We have to defend ourselves here. And of course, the British, it was illegal, because the British, they said, we will fight for you, but of course they didn't do it. When the Arabs attacked the school, we had very quickly to take the rifles, to come to the window, and to jump from here, from the window. I was in the same group with Yitzhak Rabin, in the same group, and to jump very quickly to the stand.
I met Yitzhak Rabin in 1942 in the Palmach. Palmach was the fully mobilized arm of the Haganah, which was a military organization of the Jewish community in Palestine at that time. Palestine was a British mandate. It was during the Second World War. So the situation was quite tense. Germans were in the Western Desert. Syria was under Vichy, and Palmach was the fully mobilized arm of the Haganah. Our training, you must realize, was an Israeli kind of training. We did not have the opportunity to be trained by outside armies. We didn't serve in the British Army, but we did build and organize and study military training quite well, and in that respect, his brains contributed a lot.
There was a hot
summer afternoon in Tel Aviv, I went to change my book in the library. And coming back from the library, this way, I stopped here at Wittmann ice cream parlor or kiosk to pick up an ice cream. And he was standing here having a soda. And this is how we saw each other. And detected more or less right away, for some reason, that he must be a member of the Palmach. Now, Palmach for us was the height of all imagination. He's from the Palmach, he must be wonderful. And I started inquiring. I said, can you tell me something about a guy that looks so and so, and I keep seeing him, and who is he? So they said, that must be Yitzhak Rabin. According to your description, that must be Yitzhak Rabin, and he is special. So he was, before I knew him, he was introduced to me as being special. Until one day, we stopped, and I looked at him, he looked at me, and I said, my name is Lea, and he said, my name is Yitzhak. And from then on, we walked together. When I was ready to graduate high school, it was already very, very clear to me that I'm going to join the Palmach, following in the footsteps of Yitzhak, which I never stopped doing until now. It was a time when we already were fighting against the British, and the Maavak already started, and that meant for the Palmach no home leaves at all. We were not allowed to leave our camp. So he said, ask your immediate commander, tell him that I came to fetch you, and he should give you a special permission. So when I came to our regular commander, whose name was Oded, I said, Oded, Yitzhak wants me to go with him, may I? And the Oded would smile and say, who am I to stand in the way of Yitzhak's orders? And then we went, and this motorcycle of those days couldn't have been a more wonderful vehicle. If today you took me in a Rolls Royce or a Jaguar, it wouldn't mean as much as that motorcycle meant at that time. We felt like the world is ours, and we can run around the area, just the two of us together.
על הנגב יורד ליל הסתיו ומציתי כוכב עם חרש.
By end of 45, there was full awareness of the magnitude of the tragedy. And this is why the Palmach we were also bitter about the British authority not letting those poor people who survived the camps, who survived the Holocaust, to come into Palestine.
עברו הזמנים בשדותינו כבר שנה ונותרנו מעט מרבים שאינם כבר בינינו אך נזכור את כולם את יפי הבלורית והתואר כי רעות שכזאת לעולם.
I am a Holocaust survivor. I came here to our country in September 1945 to be in the country after I lost my parents, my sister, and all I have. And we came here, 200 people on the ship Mataroa from France. We came to Haifa harbor, and the British took us immediately to a camp here in Atlit, and we were here on the barracks. And we couldn't get out because we didn't have certificate. And so after 5 weeks, the Palmach group broke in and liberated us because there were rumors that we will be sent to Mauritius or Cyprus. We didn't know exactly where.
The camp was conquered without a fight. We took out the people, 400 people, started marching them to Beit Oren, which is here across the mountain, and people, old people and youngsters and olders and women and kids, and they started to walk. And Yitzhak Rabin was one of the commanders. So I had the privilege to be under his command as an 18-year-old boy. So Yitzhak gave an order that all the Palmachnikim, the fighters, should carry those who don't who go back, who are at the back of the camp, should try and carry them fast to the Beit Oren. And the Palmachniks used to took kids on the shoulder to run to Beit Oren to run away from the British. And the story is, the fact is, that one of the kids got so frightened he peed on Yitzhak's shoulder.
תשובי בינינו לפרוע, אהבה מקודשת בדם. את תשובי בינינו לפרוע.
Afghanistan? No. Argentina? Argentina? Abstention? Australia? Yes.
On the 29th of November 47, when after the declaration at the United Nations, all Tel Aviv was on the streets dancing hora. And in the evening I met Yitzhak, and I thought I'll meet an overjoyed and happy person, like we all were, and he was very, very concerned and very obsessed with the feeling we are going into a terrible bloodshed. So I didn't meet a happy man, I met a concerned and worried person. He was very worried because he knew how poorly we are armed, how few we are, and what a difficult time we are actually facing.
We went to the bloodiest battles that I can remember during the War of Independence. And Yitzhak Rabin was the commander of that brigade. We lost, within a short period of time, about 450 of our soldiers killed. It was very, very difficult for a commander. And he was young, and he did take the burden.
It was a big achievement and a big sense of sacrifice, and 6,000 boys were buried in the cemetery. 6,000 of the whole community, counting 600,000. Being such a small community, we knew each other. And every morning you open the paper and you see the names of those who fell on the various battle areas, and there wasn't a day that you didn't know anybody or that you weren't grieving with some family. Mr. Ben-Gurion, after the decision of the United Nations, which decided upon the partition lines for the State of Israel, accepted it. It was a small and slim state. He said, all right, if this is what they grant us, let us take it and accept it, as long as we can have a Jewish state in which we shall be the commanding factor, in which we will take in all the refugees from wherever and whoever will want to come.
On May the 17th, 1948, we captured Mount Zijn. It's now Yitzhak Rabin was the brigade commander, and he was in the picture the whole time. We didn't have enough soldiers. Only 18 soldiers broke through that gate where you can see until now the traces of the bullets, and got inside all the way about 150 meters to the Jewish quarter. But at that time, we needed reinforcement. And I told commander of the Haganah, listen, if we get stuck here, nobody will break through anymore in Jerusalem, because we are the only one capable of doing it, the Palmach. So he sent us some reinforcement, but they were not good in order to hold this place, the corridor between Mount Zion and the old city of Jerusalem.
My father was leading the Al-Jihad al-Muqaddas, the Palestinian army, in Jerusalem also. And so there were a sort of a challenge between the two people. I can say that during these clashes in Jerusalem, either Rabin was there or not, but my father didn't lose any of these small fights or battles in Jerusalem. Some of them it was not small, it was big. And he was killed in the end in the Al-Qastal battle.
We fought there very hard in '48. And my brigade was the brigade that suffered the most casualties of all other brigades during our War of Independence in '48-'49. We didn't achieve the capture of these very holy and symbolic feature to our nation, to our religion.
And then both of us, in a way, had to wait for 19 years until we'll be able to do it.
This was the result of coming to an end in the war with ceasefire agreement, and which did not end as a peace agreement at that time. It was only a ceasefire agreement with a demarcation line, which we survived for 19 years.
In the second ceasefire, we had our wedding. And that was on the 23rd of August, on a ghastly hot afternoon. My parents had invited their friends. We invited our friends. Most of them came in uniform. My husband was in uniform, and I was in a white dress with white sandals. And the last moment, I was barefoot in some Greek sandals because I thought they'll be beautiful. And my aunt came for the wedding, and she looked at me and she said, "You're barefoot. The rabbi will never wed you with no stockings." So then I had to leave my beautiful Greek sandals and change them for plain sandals and white socks. Nylon stockings were not accepted in those days. So that looked kind of funny. So Palmach had done its service, and now Palmach has to realize that the time has come to get integrated into the Israeli army. Yitzhak accepted it and stayed in the army. Yitzhak did not really desire me having a career of my own and working while the children were at home. And that goes back to I think to his psychological condition, having had a working mother and not having been too happy about it. So I was teaching, and we were always would to say, why should you toil so much? Stay home.
I think that my mother was playing a very important role in the family life in general and everyday life. And I think that my father was always aware of it and appreciating it. He was always there for responsibility, for education, for sharing, and I think that she did a marvelous job in giving us the feeling that in spite of his work, we have a father.
When they were ill, when they were sick, this is when I sensed the full mobilization of him. He was a very, very worried father. And he was the Jewish mother in our family, I think.
We all had to be at breakfast on very exact time, 7:30, and had full breakfast, and after which my father drove us to school.
If you see the 8mm movies that we have, my brother is the main actor there, because I was always hiding and saying, "Die, Abba, die, stop taking my pictures."
He wasn't an intellectual in the classic way of thinking at it. He was hardly reading books at all. The more busy he got, the more he felt his mission and his duty. There was very, very little time left for himself, and that time he used for relaxation, and he said that television relaxes him, and football games relax him, and action movie relax him. I said, how can you manage with not reading books? He said, you know, I have so much to read during my days that in the evening I really don't feel any need for reading. The 1st of January 1964, he then was appointed as the commander-in-chief of the Israeli army, and for him it was, I think, kind of closing a circle and the peak of his maybe dreams and desires.
Which Arab countries threatened Israel most?
Well, the biggest one is Egypt, with 30 million population. Syria in the north has got 5.5 million population. Jordan 2, Lebanon about 2, Iraq 7.5, Saudi Arabia 5. All in all, they have got about 50 million people, while Israel has got only 2.5 million.
When Nasser started moving his tanks into the Sinai, and when it became more and more obvious that there'll be a war, it was also at the same time clear that there'll be a war not only with Egypt that moved its tanks. There has to be a war with Syria and Egypt at the same time, because we cannot tolerate forever that they'll sit on the Golan Heights and endanger the life of the settlers below the Golan Heights, all those kibbutzim that were there and under fire constantly. Ben-Gurion called him and said to him, Yitzhak, how dare you actually? In 1956, we were fighting on one front, on the Egyptian, with the umbrella, air umbrella of the French and the British. And you now think you can fight on two fronts without any umbrella, with no agreement with any other country, just by yourself. What makes you believe that you can do it? He started getting, you know, a little bit frightened. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am overconfident. Maybe I'm taking upon myself a responsibility that is too much. On the 23rd, after he had left the house at 4 o'clock in the morning, he returned home about 6 o'clock in the evening, and I saw that he is in a very, very low mood. That was the doubts, and at the same time exhausted. And he's telling me at 6 o'clock in the afternoon, he's going up and down the corridor smoking, and says, I'm now going to talk to the commander of the Southern Command, the Southern Command was Beersheba, which meant 2 hours of driving at that time. There was no taking aeroplanes or so, driving by car to Beersheba. And I looked at him, said, no, you're not going anywhere now. I think the time for you has come to take some time off and rest.
was frightening, and I always was aware that the responsibility for this war is on the shoulders of my own father. And I was aware of the tough period that he is going through. I was feeling for him. I was always breathing with him.
So the doctor came, examined him, and said, yes, I don't see any other signs. He's probably exhausted. I will give him an injection and he'll go to sleep. After he got the injection, and being a person of high level of responsibility, he called his deputy, which was at that time Mr. Weizmann. And he said, Yasser, this is not a regular time. I don't know what will happen. I'm going to sleep. I'm passing the responsibility to you. Suppose the war breaks out all of a sudden. And then, of course, because of spreading the rumors that he had a nervous breakdown, the political powers that were behind Dayan to become a Minister of Defense started being very loud and very, very, very vocal. And so as a result, they said, we are in danger and our leadership is insecure, provokes insecurity, and we need someone to enhance the morale of the people.
He was a warrior with an O. He worried the whole time. And that was his most important characteristic for preparing the army to fight in 1967.
I was in school with all my friends when we heard the sirens at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I remember myself going down to the shelter with all the school children and praying for my father quietly, crying and praying for my father.
When the shells began landing in Jerusalem, I thought that I should do everything possible because of political reasons to take the eastern part of Jerusalem as a counterattack. And the most important minute was when we broke through this gate and when we crossed together with Moshe Dayan and Yitzhak Rabin on Wednesday, June the 7th, 1967. It was a great moment.
I am your child, Jerusalem. Jerusalem is mine. You are the orchard in the sand. I am the fruit you bear. You are the glove that warms my hand. I am the smile you wear. You are the music of
The news that the Wailing Wall was captured was an encouraging factor to all troops all over the area, doesn't matter where they fought.
And I started hearing the stories about Moshe Dayan, the big general, and I just couldn't take it. And my mother came back home at night and found me crying. And she said, what happened? I said, I cannot stand this injustice. He was there building the army, preparing. The whole responsibility was on his shoulders. This one came 4 days before the war, and now they're talking about him as the war hero. I told my mother, this is so unfair. And she told me that tomorrow morning they'll start coming with the announcement about the boys who were killed. And this is what counts, really. And the glory is big enough for everybody.
You are the branches of a tree.
When I got to the Western Wall, after so many years, I was happy and satisfied. Happy because we were there, and satisfied because destiny has bestowed upon my soldiers the role of bringing back the Western Wall to the Jewish people.
Jerusalem is mine.
If you focus on real peace, you then had to focus only on America, which is the same right now. So he said, I want to go to Washington. Levi Eshkol, the prime minister, was more than amazed by this desire of Yitzhak. He said, you, Yitzhak, the soldier, the military man, you want to be a diplomat now in Washington, stand there with a cocktail glass in your hand? He said, never mind.
And when he arrived in Washington, I saw him very shortly after that arrival. My impression of Rabin initially was a rough diamond.
So here came a general, a Jewish general, whose English was not Shakespearean exactly, but which with a limited amount of vocabulary was able to articulate the whole saga of Israel.
And after dinner, Rabin would sit down at one end of the coffee table and describe how, if the Russians were so foolish as to try to intervene in the '67 war, how the Israelis would have destroyed the Soviet Air Force. And he said it not with any bravado, he said it very calmly. And he would take all of the cups on the table and move them around in different ways and say, now, if the Syrians were here and da-da-da, and the Russians would have to come in, they couldn't fly directly because that kind of plane only has this much fuel, so they would have to land in Yugoslavia. Then they would come in. That kind of a trip is 1,800 miles, at the end of which they'd be down on fuel, and then we'd be able to knock them right out of the sky. And I would listen to these stories and be totally amazed by this shy man in a new job as a diplomat after so many years as a military leader, and in a totally non-boastful way describe how Israel was going to defeat the Soviet Air Force. I said, Mr. Ambassador, wouldn't it be possible that the Russians would shoot missiles directly at Israel? He said, that is a possibility.
He had one of the best analytical minds that I've ever met. He was one of, I always thought he was one of the most decent people I met. He was quite different from the typical Israeli ambassadors who demanded a special treatment for Israel on the ground of fellow democracy, and who would, on the basis of the Jewish religion, which I also obviously am Jewish, thought there was some special claim they had. Rabin never did this. Rabin insisted on making his case on the merit of his argument. His duty was to embed Israeli needs in American thinking, so that we thought of them as American necessities and not as a favor we did to Israel, where every time something else was needed, another fight had to start or another. And he was quite unique in this among the people that I had met. But above all, I respected his opinion so much that I often asked his opinion on matters that had nothing to do with Israel. There were one or two occasions when we were planning to do things in Vietnam, where without telling him exactly what we were planning, but I explained the concept as an option to him and asked him how he would react if he were on the other side. And unfortunately, what he told me how he would react is how they did react. Our people didn't believe it, but Rabin was right. And on many things, I had really, I thought he was a man of world-class intelligence and analytic ability.
And what became very clear to me in the last months that he was in the United States as ambassador was that somehow or another he had decided that if he was going to have any influence over the situation, he was going to have to get into politics. And so I used to kid him about the fact that I would like to be his political campaign manager.
When he returned to Israel, he decided to conduct his personal campaign to become member of the Knesset. There were elections planned to the end of the year. But in the meantime, the Yom Kippur War occurred. And this, if you ask me, this was one of the lowest points in Yitzhak's life altogether, because he just couldn't cope with the frustration that here is a major war and he has no role in it. I said, Yitzhak, I have the feeling that this war is going so wrong. It is such a disaster in our history. Mark my words, that you are out of this war will only serve in your favor. And then, about a month or two later, he found himself confronted with the situation that he is appointed prime minister. And Yitzhak was totally amazed.
After the Yom Kippur War was over, naturally the diplomacy started. In fact, the whole impact of the Yom Kippur War on our relations was that it facilitated Kissinger to open a major thrust of diplomacy, because he was able to negotiate the peace process while the war was there. It is to say, to relieve Egypt of the humiliation of the Six-Day War, and yet not to give Egypt the notion that it can destroy Israel. So Egypt was won over, but was not vanquished.
I firmly believed, and I think Secretary Kissinger did at that time, in the step-by-step process. We opposed what was proposed usually by the Soviet Union. They wanted a major international conference with all the parties brought together. I never thought that was a practical way to make headway, and Secretary Kissinger did not either. So we were facing not only the traditional differences between the Arabs and the Israelis, but we were faced with the interference in that process, with the Soviet Union trying to get a bigger and bigger foothold in the Middle East negotiations.
I believe that Rabin wanted what I wanted, and that Rabin more or less agreed with my strategy. In fact, agreed with my strategy. The problem Rabin had was that he had a divided cabinet. So he was trying to maneuver the cabinet towards my position.
Nights, days, nights were spent with Dr. Kissinger, who was either coming or going. He, by the way, was also coming and going to Damascus at the same time, but there it always ended with no. Whereas here, there was hope.
And I think Rabin made mistakes. Rabin made the mistake of letting me to believe that he could manage what he told me. And I had taken a preliminary visit to Israel before I went into the final negotiation. And when I left, I stopped at Golda's house. And she said, what are you going to do when you come back to negotiate? And I said, well, this is what we're going to do, because that's what I was here for. And Golda said, this will never work. The cabinet will never go along with it. And I tell you, it will never work. And I went on the plane and told Joe Sisko, isn't it amazing? She's out of office for only 6 months, and she's already lost touch with reality. But she hadn't lost touch with reality. So that was the cause of the misunderstanding.
We all remember the very bitter day when Yitzhak had to say no to Dr. Kissinger, because the terms that President Sadat suggested were unacceptable by Yitzhak. And Yitzhak said, I'm terribly sorry to disappoint you, Dr. Kissinger.
And it was very unusual. In fact, it was the only time it ever happened that an Israeli prime minister came to the airport when I was an official. And he personally saw me off. And he did make something for him, a very unusual statement, saying, A, that he considered every IDF soldier like his own son, and that therefore he had not only the general feeling of family, but the specific feeling. And knowing Yitzhak, this was something so unheard of. I was in tears, and it didn't prevent then a period of tension when I came back. But I never doubted that we would come to an understanding.
This is a sad day for America, which has invested much hope and faith.
I know that you have done more than a human being can do in the efforts to move from war towards peace. I'm sorry that the present efforts to bring about an interim agreement between Egypt and Israel have been suspended.
And Rabin, in conversations with me, realized that in this battle there is not going to be winners or losers, but we will all be losers in this battle between us and the United States. And the only winners will be the Russians and the radical Arabs. And he was at that time trying to find a way out of the deadlock.
And he and I took a walk, and we agreed on what then became the final settlement. And when it was all over, he said to me, I want to tell you something. In all these difficulties, I never doubted for one moment that you were carrying out our common strategy, and that your strategy was to convince the Arabs that they had no military option and that they had to get the best terms possible. It was very generous of him.
And on September 1st, 1975, they signed the interim agreement, and that was a big achievement because Yitzhak really sensed that he had done a major step forward in the direction of peace with Egypt, which he regarded as the first priority on the road to peace.
We believe that the cause of peace needs to take risks for its achievement. And I believe that by this agreement, we are embarking on a road that might be a long one, but will lead to what all the people in the area want, a real peace.
And when Sadat came to Jerusalem in '77, he wasn't in the government anymore. At the same time, he rejoiced it and celebrated it and was very, very, very happy.
In 1979, in April, in the night of the 22nd of April, a group of terrorists from the PLO landed with a boat, speedboat here in the coast, right here. And of course, we didn't know that they landed, but at 2 o'clock in the night, suddenly we heard strong bombs. And we thought it was again Katyushas, and we thought we should run to the shelter. But then in a few moments we understood that it's a terrorist attack. The terrorists broke into our apartment house. So I took my little baby daughter and I hide with her. And my husband, Danny, took in his arms the other daughter. And the terrorists broke into the house. They found Danny and Einat, and they started to look where we were. And we were in the attic. And my daughter, she was crying, and they had to hush her. And they were a long time in the house, and she lost conscious, and she never came back. And they took my husband and my other daughter, and they came to the beach very brutally. They shoot my husband, the father, in front of the eyes of my daughter, his daughter, and then they wanted him to drown in the sea, so they pushed him into the sea. And the other terrorist, he took his gun, and with the heavy side, he smashed my daughter's scarf, and he was laughing like crazy while doing it. And she was yelling and crying, but he had no mercy. And in the end of that night, I had no family and no world. Nothing was left. Everything was ruined.
And Yitzhak became the Minister of Defense in '84, overjoyed and a happy person. He was so happy to go into the Ministry of Defense and didn't worry about not being the Prime Minister 1 minute, and said, my first priority will be to remove our forces from Lebanon, which took him about 7 or 8 months until he accomplished it, because in the meantime he wanted to prepare the southern Lebanon army for this position and to create the region of security between the northern border and Lebanon, Retzuat HaBitachon.
At that time, they exchanged 1,800 terrorists. I heard that one of the terrorists that killed my family was released, and I felt it hurt me so much that the terrorist goes free to his life. So I called Rabin, and I told him that I feel very bad and I'm very mad. And he invited me to his office. And at the end of this meeting, it seems that no one of us was convinced, but we understood the problem that each other had to understand, to be convinced. I thought that I would never hear again from him. And a week later, I got the most moving, touching, tender letter from Rabin, where he wrote me that it was very hard for him, this meeting, and he was thinking about it a long time after it, and he could understand. In the end of the letter, he wrote me, "Thank you." I think only a very special person can, after such a big argument, thank you for bringing your point.
We are facing basic two options: to give in to violence, forget about it. We'll never do it. Therefore, the alternative to that is to meet violence by force. I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel coming from the PLO.
In the first year of the Intifada, it was a fight to change and to win the Palestinian public opinion. The second year it was to win the international public opinion. The third year we were working on winning the Israeli public opinion.
That in essence says to the Palestinians in the territories, with you we are in confrontation. Let's shift the confrontation to negotiation.
Yes, in that time we were looking to Rabin as a cruel man, that he was trying to crush the bones of the people in that period. But even so, it was clear for us that if we would like to make peace, we must make it with such men like Rabin, because usually those who fought and were in battles killed other people, seeing some of their friends being killed, they can understand more than any other one what war means.
Well, I always had the feeling that Rabin, war hero, assured of his place in history in a sense, was willing to take more of a risk for peace than his predecessor government was. And I don't know the details of the transition, but I just had a feeling that if he said this is good for Israel, the Israeli people would have followed, or did follow. And I think one of the reasons he'll go down in history as a great man is that he was willing to take risks for peace.
Told him, look, if you will go for peace, count on me. If you will leave the road of peace, I shall be again a contender. I really think time has come for peace, and this is the most important consideration.
At the night that he was elected, he said, we shall change the national priorities of our country. We shall stop investing money in the West Bank and devote the money for the sake of the country, and we shall make peace. We shall make peace.
I decided to bring about a change.
ולא שירי הלל, לכן רק שירו שיר לשלום, אל תלחשו תפילה.
So eventually he recognized that if you really want to solve the 100-year-old conflict with the Palestinians, there is one person that you have to talk to, and that is Yasser Arafat. And there was a group of people, and they started moving the peace process on a very low flame in Oslo. Yasser Peres at that time was a great advocate of it and believed in it, and Yitzhak was skeptic. He still had his reservation. Is it really going to work?
The alternative was clearly Hamas. I went over to Yitzhak, I told him also the story. He says, look, he may disappear, and then what? And that's what led to the recognition of the PLO. The most difficult part of it was when I suggested to Yitzhak that we should bring in Arafat from Tunisia to Gaza.
You have to understand, for many years, Arafat was not only the murderer of kids, of women in Israel. He became a symbol of evil, symbol of the darkness days of Israel.
And now came the suggestion that there'll be a formal ceremony on the White House in the presence of President Clinton.
From the first moment, I understood that Arafat intended to come, because for him it's the international recognition. I called Yitzhak Rabin and I said, okay, Arafat is coming. And then he decided to go. And I called the White House and I said, okay, but no hugs, no kisses, short handshake, no pistols, no uniforms, no signs on the uniform, nothing.
Yitzhak was very reluctant about it. And then on Saturday morning he agreed to go without telling me. So I heard it over the radio. And that created a real scandal between the two of us. He apologized. And the agreement was that he will go and shake the hands, and Abu Mazen and myself will sign the documents. That's what happened.
He asked me to come with him. And I had only a few hours to decide. But then, as the hours went, it was getting closer and closer. I called him and I told him, I can't come and maybe shake hands and be so close to the people that are responsible for the brutal death of my family.
It was 20 minutes before the ceremony. 3,000 people were invitees were there. Martin Indyk called me from the Oval Office. And he said, look, Eitan, Arafat came with a khaki suit. I said, is it a khaki suit or uniform? So he said, well, you can call it uniform. I said, I can call it khaki suit.
I could almost feel it that Prime Minister Rabin and Chairman Arafat were trying to avoid each other. They circled the room so as not to have to meet each other. And I was quite apprehensive about that because I knew they'd be expected to shake hands. And both the President and I were concerned about it. And I remember summoning up my courage and going over to the Prime Minister and saying, Mr. Prime Minister, you know what will be expected of you. And say, yes, I know what will be expected, and I'll do it when the time comes.
But then, you know, when I said when we went out there, it was going to be quite an extravaganza, and Mr. Arafat was an emotional person, you know, and there was going to have to be a handshake. Well, now the handshake was another thing altogether. He said, I have been fighting him for decades. I said, you just told me you can't make peace with your friends. There's going to be 1 billion people watching. What are you going to do? He said, all right, but no kissing.
We have come to try and put an end to the hostilities so that our children's children will no longer experience the painful cost of war, violence and terror.
This was the start, not only between the Palestinians and the Israelis. It was a start in the Middle East.
Mr. President, thank you, thank you, thank you.
He was a great general. And he was a great man for peace. And because of that, we had succeeded to sign the Peace of the Brave together in the White House in Washington.
My son was an ordinary, normal, happy teenager who was drafted into the army. He had just come home on leave after having been in Lebanon for 2 months. He left our home Saturday night, went to a friend, and the last words he said to me were, "I'll see you Sunday night." When we did not hear from him by late Sunday night, we notified the military authorities. And it wasn't until Tuesday afternoon that we were notified by Israel television that they had a videotape, and that was the first we knew of our son's fate.
But then when they came to announce to Yitzhak that formally, their formal invitation to come and receive the Nobel-prijs, that was for Yitzhak one of the most difficult days in his tenure as prime minister, because this was the day when he had to decide upon a military operation to rescue Nachshon Wachsman.
The terrorists' demands were the release of the spiritual leader of the Hamas movement, Sheikh Ahmad Yassin, who has recently been released, and 200 other terrorists in Israeli prison. Rabin put all responsibility on Arafat at the time. Arafat called our home and told us that if our son were in Gaza, he would do everything in his power to find him and return him to us safely. Friday night was the night of the ultimatum. My son was shown on this videotape where he said, "I was kidnapped by the Hamas. They are holding me. They want the release of Sheikh Ahmad Yassin and 200 other terrorists. If Rabin does this, my life will be spared. If not, they will kill me."
He spent the whole day in looking into all the details of the operation. And he was fully concerned about this operation that was about to take place that evening, Friday night. And they came Friday lunch, noon time, the Norwegian, to invite him to Oslo. So really his head was somewhere else. So he said, "Thank you very much, and I highly appreciate it, and I really am looking forward, etc. But you will forgive me now. I am very preoccupied with something very urgent, and I beg your pardon," and that's it.
General Yoram Yair walked through the door, called us into a private room. As soon as we saw him, I knew what he was going to say. It couldn't be good news. And all he said was one sentence. He was choked, and he said there was a rescue attempt, there was a military action, it failed, Nachshon was killed. And it was just after Shabbat that Prime Minister Rabin came to our home.
And he faced a very angry, bitter family, and a very angry, bitter, and frustrated father. But he came, he was very brave, and slowly explained everything. He began to cry, we cried together. It was very hard for us.
He said, "Believe me, I would gladly give my Oslo, my Nobel Prize for the life of these two soldiers." And he meant it every bit.
We were believing that there are enemies for the peace of the brave in the two sides. And we were dealing with both of us on this platform. And this crisis of fanatic groups in our side was trying to eliminate the peace of the brave.
After that, he called every holiday. And he asked me if I want to come to the signing of the peace treaty. And I told him that I'm only a few days after the morning, but I will come because this is a very happy day. It is a holiday for Israel.
Of course, they had been in Jordan before. Yitzhak had been several times in the dialogue for preparing the peace accord. And I think they always met like old friends, never like yesterday's enemy and today's friends. There was this foundation of a friendship between them.
They create every day or every week or every month new movements against the peace. He called him traitor, killer.
How can you endure it? Why don't you tell your people to come and confront them? Why is there never anybody to confront them? Why do they have the street for themselves? He said, what can I do? Like that. He didn't want to deal with it. He didn't want to come to the Labour Party and say, come on, you must come in a contra demonstration because these people are bothering me every Friday afternoon. It was below his pride, I think.
I know also that the history of human being, and especially of the Jews, show that people that can burn pictures, flags, and puppet, they also can burn people.
I realized that this is a serious problem, and I was worried. And I could not understand how people in this country could call my father a traitor.
And when asked, publicly or privately, do you believe that they might really kill you? He was smiling. He said, come on, you don't really take that seriously. A Jew will kill me? Do you really think so? He would not take this as a serious threat.
And we had the feeling that our people are getting a little bit, they are retreating from the peace process. And we tried to speak with Yitzhak Rabin and to ask him, it was my suggestion that we should make a demonstration here in this square.
And when we went out to the rally, he was concerned. What is it going to be? What is this going to look like? And if this place is not going to be crowded, then this is a test for some kind of a failure. So he rather wouldn't like the failure to be seen. However, it was crowded, and it was wonderful, and it was overwhelming, and it was overflowing. Streets were packed. And when they were standing and singing the song of peace, and he was hugging Peres, I think this was very sincere. He sort of wanted to demonstrate the two of us, we are doing it together.
We stood very far, and she couldn't see him, and I took her on my hands, and she went back and said, wow, he is so happy.
We finished the rally, Yitzhak left, I was staying with my wife and Jean, and suddenly I see Yitzhak Rabin running towards me. I said, Yitzhak, what happened?
He said, you know, he had a kind of a motion. He said, you know what kind of a idiot I am? I already was near the steps, and Mr. Goldman, who was at this time the Deputy Minister of Education, says, but you didn't thank Cheech and Jan Friedman. I said, yes, you are right, it's terrible. And he came back and he hugged us and he kissed us and he was so excited. He said, Cheech, this was one of the greatest days of my life.
And when he reached the foot of the stairs, I was 1 meter behind him. He reached the foot of the stairs and I hear the shots and I see him falling.
The ship has weathered every wreck. The prize we sought is won. The port is near, the bells I hear. The people all exulting, while follow eyes the steady keel. The vessel
It's every little step that this country took. There he was, if not in center, somewhere.
Where on the deck my captain lies.
This was the first time he broke a promise to me that nothing will ever happen to him.
The bleeding drops of red. Oh, Captain, my Captain, rise up and hear the bells. Rise up, for you the flag is flung.
Gerald Rabin, shalom.
Shalom. Very much like your brother. Did a great resemblance.
You are welcome.
Thank you.
Mrs. Rabin, is it possible to have a picture of you?
And being here together on the issue of environmental problems is one proof that yes, we have a dialogue, we share issues, we share problems, we want to solve them together, regardless of where the train of peace is right now standing. As we came back to our ancient homeland, there was one Yitzhak, my Yitzhak, our Yitzhak, who really took upon his shoulders the commitment and the responsibility to break through a cycle of 100 years of conflict and saying, enough of blood and tears. We need peace. Maybe I will finally see the meaning of my personal sacrifice and the sacrifice of my family and all those who loved him so much.
The bleeding drops of red. The ship is anchored safe and sound, its voyage closed and done. From fearful trip the victor ship comes in with object one. Exult, O shores, and ring, O bells. But I, with mournful tread, will walk the deck my captain lies, fallen cold and dead. But oh, my heart, my heart, my heart, the bleeding drops of red, where on the deck my captain lies, fallen cold and dead. My heart, my heart, my heart, the bleeding drops of red.